The hour is 6 o'clock. It's Thursday, the 25th of January. Let me call our Select Board meeting to order. We have a couple of items to address this evening. The first and most important one is the fiscal year 2025 budget presentation from the town manager. A couple of housekeeping items before we get started. I want to note that Mr. Kratman and Mr. Mackey are joining us virtually. Those of you in the room can't see them, but their screen here is facing us. And I want to apologize to those of you in the room because I'm sitting to the side here, but I want to make sure that everybody can see the screen. So bear with me. I will try to speak loudly so you can hear me. You won't be able to read my lips tonight. We always begin our meetings with the pledge. I'd invite everyone in the room to please stand. The flag is right behind that screen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you for that. Share this one. Just one item I want to mention. I had a couple of inquiries during the course of the day. I didn't get to respond to one of them, but the other I did, pertaining to the opportunity to offer public comment this evening relative to the budget. And I just want to make it known at the outset of the meeting, if you're here in the room or if you intend to join us later and you're watching, this is a listening session meeting. It's not a public hearing. There will not be an opportunity for public input. There will be plenty of opportunity for that as we go forward with the budget process. You're welcome to join us at future Select Board meetings. There's a residence section and generally our regular meetings, and you have an opportunity to address the board on any matter, including budgetary matters in that forum. The Finance Committee will have public hearings on the budget as the budget process begins and proceeds through our annual review. And that's another opportunity for interested parties with concerns about the budget or topics within it to bring those concerns to the Finance Committee. And then ultimately, the board here will offer its recommendations on each of the budget within each of the warrant articles as we get closer to the town meeting. So there's ample opportunity to make your views heard. We always will accept email communications, written communications, and the like. So please, we want to welcome that input. I just want to be clear that tonight's not the opportunity for that. There will be other opportunities to do so. With that, I'm going to turn the floor over to Mr. Montori to give us his budget message and budget presentation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, everyone. This is the annual budget presentation that I've done for the last 14 years. This is for FY 2025. The format that I'm presenting the budget is similar to what I've done in the past. I think it's worked well. Looks a little bit different. We had a lot of debate on font and appearance. So hopefully this year we have a better visual presentation, but the numbers are the numbers. First, I just want to start off by saying that the presentation is going to cover the budget process that we went through this year. We're going to review revenues and expenditures, the overall FY25 appropriations. We're going to look at revenues that include the tax levy, state aid, local receipts, other available funds. We're going to do a high-level review of the town and school FY25 budget. We'll look at a 5-year budget projection, and we'll talk about some financial items that we need to monitor, and then just a review of the Select Board's financial policy. Just to recap the budget process for FY25 that we recently went through. departments were sent a budget message on November 3rd that indicated that budgets for FY25 would be due November 22nd. The guidelines within that budget message were to adjust salaries for contractual obligations. Since we do not have any contracts settled, that no cost of living adjustments would be placed in the budget. We would adjust those later. All budgets would be level service, which means fund your budgets to allow for you to provide the same service that you provided in fiscal year 2024. That's quite different than a level funded budget, which means provide a budget that's at the same funding level as it was in FY24, which in some cases could mean a service reduction or cuts within a budget. So my guidance was a level service budget to all operating budgets and departments. And then I asked each department to provide me separately from their budget a list of 3 priorities that they, if funding became available, that they would like to see funded. From November 27th through December 15th, we went through a budget review where I met with each department head, went through their budgets in detail, had follow-up meetings and discussions, reviewed the budget, both expenditures and revenues with the town accountant to finalize the overall budget. Then between December 15th and January 19th, budget development, which meant putting the final pieces together on the budget again through discussion with various department heads, the assistant town manager, and the town accountant. Starting on January 29th, which is Monday, the Finance Committee will start their review of my recommended budget. The actual department budgets went out to the Select Board and the Finance Committee today. That was each individual department budgets, and we will work to put them on the website between tomorrow and Monday. First thing we're going to do is go through revenues and expenditures. The expenditures will cover the overall town and school budget, other local expenditures, state and county charges, and then the revenues will focus on the tax levy, state aid, local receipts, and any other available funds that are used to fund the budget. Starting with expenditures, this first chart gives you an indication of what we have actually appropriated in previous fiscal years, not only for the general fund budget, but for other actions at town meeting. For the purposes of tonight, we're working on the column that says projected budget FY25, the second to last column on the far right. And the budget that I am proposing is $138,014,110, which is an increase of $2,698,322 from FY22. That is for the town, the school, and any of our fixed costs within the budget, including debt. What's important to note, two lines below where it says reserve for appropriation, that $581,558, that is money set aside for the town's side future funding of any cost of living increases and contractual contracts that are approved. That's the money we had available to set aside. So if you total those two together, the actual budget increased a little over $3.2 million, $3.3 million, and it was about a 2.4% increase overall.
Richard,
Yes.
just to be clear, when you say you have this portion that's reserved for appropriation, and you said town side, that does not include the schools?
That does not include the schools. The schools have their full appropriation within their budget.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted
Yep.
public.
No, that's a good point. The very bottom of this sheet where it says cherry, and then just to go back for a second, all of the other lines that are on this chart, and where it has sewer enterprise, water enterprise, stormwater, cable, town meeting actions, those will be filled in as we move through the budget process. At a later date, within the next few weeks. I hope tonight to set a date with the board to have a meeting separate from a regular meeting to present the enterprise funds and the capital budget, which again will fill in this particular chart prior to town meeting. And then once the warrant is finalized, we'll fill in the rest of these lines with any actions taking place at town meeting. The very bottom is the cherry sheet offsets, $72,002. This is money that we need to raise, but we'll receive back at the on our cherry sheet from the state for state aid. This specifically is for public libraries offset, so that money will go to the library. The governor released her budget this past week. We received our state aid numbers today, which I'll go over as we move forward, but this area was reduced by, I think, about $500. Wasn't anything major. So that's the first couple of areas that we need to raise funds for in the general fund. The next, other local expenditures. This is these are funds in addition to the budget that we need to set aside and appropriate funds for. And the only area in this section is the overlay reserve, $413,188. And this is for the assessors to provide exemptions and abatements on property taxes. In the past, the only other area that we raised funds for were to pay back the teacher salary deferral, but that was paid off in FY 2023. The reason for the reduction in our overlay reserve, it's just based on what we spent, but also we have money from previous years that have carried over into the overlay reserve that provide us enough funding to reduce this area. The next area we need to raise funds for are our state and county charges. These are charges from the Commonwealth for a variety of areas. Mosquito control, which is our mosquito control assessment. Mosquito control helps the town with spraying and on when mosquitoes are problematic for various communities. They also will address issues for private homeowners who would like the back of their yards or their streets sprayed. The Regional Transit Authority, the LRTA, has an assessment, we're projecting $314,486. That's the local bus service from Lowell. The two other major areas are school choice tuition, which are students in town who go to another school district and we have to pay the per pupil assessment. And then the charter school assessment is the largest portion, which is projected to be $1,347,919, and that's for any students that go to a charter school from our community. I projected a 5% increase in the state and county charges in the governor's budget. She actually is proposing that the state and county charges be approximately $24,000 less than in FY24, but because the state legislature, both the House and Senate, have a ways to go in their budget process, we're not going to reduce this number until we see what the final budget is in July. So we'll maintain this number, which we've historically done through the budget process. So that's the expenditures. Now we're going to go to the revenues to help fund all of those items I just mentioned. First, we're going to talk about is the largest revenue source in town, and that's the property tax levy. This is the tax levy on real property in the community, both for commercial, industrial, personal property, and residential. We're restricted on how much money we can raise within the property tax levy. We're restricted to 2.5% of the previous year's levy plus any new growth. New growth, as you can see from the slide, is additional tax revenue generated by new construction, renovations, and other increases in the property tax base during the calendar year. That new growth is calculated by multiplying the assessed value associated with any new construction, renovations, or other increases to our prior year tax rate. And then that growth is added to our previous year's tax levy limit, and the 2.5% increase to give us a new levy limit for the town. We're projecting growth to be $1,050,000 in FY '25. The new growth is, a projection came after discussions between myself and the chief assessor based on what we're seeing for development in the community. This slide is an example of the restrictions we have within Proposition 2.5. As I mentioned, the previous years, you take the previous year's levy limit, you add 2.5%, you add any new growth, and you come up with a new levy limit. And that's the base you work from for this fiscal year, and then obviously for the following. If you have any Proposition 2.5 overrides, we have debt exclusions. You would add that to the levy limit to allow you to increase your levy limit beyond the levy limit, but it has to be specifically for that debt. As you'll see when we go through this presentation, we have a large amount of debt exclusions in the community. But this slide's important because this is the limit we have to work within for tax revenue in town. We do not have the opportunity just to tax as much as we want for any amount or for any budgetary item in town. This slide is a history of our new growth, just to give you an indication of how it fluctuates. We've been fortunate over the last few years to have high new growth because we've had some large projects, such as the Home Depot project that was recently finished. We also had some residential development that helped. But the biggest driver in our new growth is personal property. And that's makes up a large portion of our new growth, and a lot of that comes from the utility companies. As you can see in the yellow, the utility companies have made up a large portion of our new growth each year, and will continue to do so, hopefully. This next slide gives you a snapshot of our levy, tax levy over the past, since 2019. As I mentioned earlier, under the total property taxes, you can see our debt exclusion amount. We have a little over $11 million that we raise in debt exclusions that are on the tax levy. It's one of the higher amounts in the area, and that's for the New Center Elementary School, the fire station, the high school. 50% of the sewer debt is a debt exclusion. So we have a fair amount of projects within that figure. The amortization of a bond premium, we're allowed to reduce our levy by this amount. It's a bond premium we received for a bond that we authorized about 6 or 7 years ago. So we reduced our levy by that $36,283. We do not have any levy capacity projected for FY25. As you can see in FY24, the levy capacity that we had was $11,812. What that means is we were $11,812 under our levy limit. The previous year, we were $51,359, and in FY22, we were $848,151 under our levy limit, but that's because we had an amended new growth late in the fiscal year that we were able to capture. But historically, we bump right up against the levy limit. Just to give you some indication of what other communities do, Bill Ricker has a levy capacity of $29 million. They're under their levy limit by that amount. Burlington is $13 million under their levy limit. Andover's $1.5 million under their levy limit. I believe Wilmington is about $1 million under their levy limit. We don't have that that opportunity. We consistently need to go to our full levy. This next slide just gives an indication if this budget is approved and we increase the levy limit as proposed, the average tax bill, if all the values stayed the same, there was no further shift in the values or increases in the value, the average property tax bill would go up $238.90. The average condo would go up $175.68, average commercial $704.03, and the average industrial $866.29. This slide gives you history back to 2019. The columns are a little bunched, but gives you a good history. And then this slide just focuses in on the projected 2025. And that's increasing the levy $3,248,896. This next slide, it's always good to look at where we stand in regard to our average tax bill in the community. These are all FY24 average tax bills for these communities. What I did was show the current average tax bill in Tewksbury and also our projected FY25 average tax bill if the values all stayed the same. And in either case, we're right in the middle of all these other communities. We're not on the high end, we're not on the low end. And that's even with our increase for next year. This next slide is an exercise I like to go through each year because there's always discussions about property taxes and the increase in property taxes and not increasing taxes. In order to not increase property taxes in town, we'd need to not increase the levy at all, which means we wouldn't increase it to $3.2 million that is being recommended in the FY25 budget to fund the town and school budget. As I mentioned, the total budget is a little over $138 million. Of that amount, $60.5 million is made up of salaries. And in order to, if you wanted to cut $3.2 million to not increase taxes, you would be cutting positions in the community. To go further, the town and school operating, the Shawshene Regional Vocational Tech Assessment, Essex Aggie Tech Assessment, capital outlay accounts, and unclassifieds, which is the remainder of the budget after salaries, make up an additional $77.4 million within the recommended budget. And of that, $69.9 million really cannot be reduced. This next slide gives you a list of those items, and they range from the snow and ice budget, the solid waste budget, veterans benefits, our elections budget, repairs and maintenance budgets, capital outlay, insurance accounts, debt, legal costs, retirement assessments, group health insurance, Medicare, property and liability insurance, our regional emergency communications assessment, Shawshene Tech and Essex Aggie. So when you go through this list and then a list of items in the school budget that can't be cut, the $69.9 million, once you put that aside, does not leave a lot to cut. So going back to the previous slide, that leaves a little over $7.5 million to cut $3.2 million. If you do that, the reduction would impact all levels of overall delivery of service to the residents. But the point of the slide is there's not a lot of discretionary spending in this budget. It's a very tight budget. There are no, what I would call, luxuries within the budget. Departments have brought forward budgets that will maintain service, and which is a very good, a very high level of service to this community, both on the town side and the school side. So when we talk about cutting taxes or reducing taxes, it's not as easy as it seems. The next item for revenue, second piece, largest piece, is state aid, $18.2 million. The governor's budget, based on the most recent numbers that we saw, have increased local aid about $80,000. Again, it still has to go through the House and Senate and then Conference Committee, which will not be finalized until July. We track the history on how all of this works, and it will change a couple of times before it's final, based on how state revenues have been coming in. We shouldn't be touching anything in regard to state aid, and let's get to the Conference Committee, and if it comes out higher than we projected, then we can adjust in the fall as we always have been. Local receipts, this is the local revenue that we generate. This is what we have some control over. This is something that is always heavily discussed on what we actually take in for revenue, what we project for revenue. As you can see, there are a fair amount of local receipts that we do collect. I'm going to go into detail in each one. But I want to point out that in FY23, we actually collected $14 million, a little over $14 million in local receipts. My projection for FY25 is 9.8, which obviously people will look at and say, well, you're way under your estimate, or your estimates are way under what we should be. But that's absolutely not the case. There are things that drove the actual receipts in FY22 that we can not count on in future years, not just FY25, but beyond, and we don't want to build our budgets based on those false revenue projections. A good example, the first one is non-recurring revenue at the bottom. This revenue is reimbursements we receive from grants or other reimbursements from the Commonwealth or federal government that we can't count on each year. SPED reimbursement, Medicaid reimbursement, came in at $391,000. It's money from the federal government. Again, I wouldn't really want to bank too much on both state or federal money on an annual basis, so we need to be careful there. Interest earnings, $1.3 million. That's very unique to FY23 and probably will be to 24 because of the higher interest rates and cash available that we have. We borrowed for the DPW project this year, and that all will gain interest and be put in the general fund. The last time we saw something, revenue this high, was in 2020, a little over $2 million, and that's because we borrowed money for the Center Elementary School and the fire station, so that gained a lot of interest. But as you can see, in FY22, when things weren't good, we had negative interest. So we're very careful in how we go about with our interest earning projection. So if you looked at what we've realistically taken in FY22 and FY19, it's around $200,000. So $1 million of what came in FY23 can easily be reduced, bringing that actual revenue down from 14 million down to 13 million. And if you take out the 943, you're down to 12 million. The other areas that would reduce that $14 million would be hotel motel tax. That is going to be cut in half in future years because we're losing one of our hotels. We also have one of our hotels with 20 is used as an emergency shelter. After 90 days, we will not receive hotel motel tax revenue from those rooms that are used as shelter. So that's why we have a reduction in the hotel motel tax. Also, there's a concern with future development and the reason for a reduction in license and permits. So when you look at all of that and you take into consideration all of those issues, the $14 million is not a number that you can say is going to come in every year. You can look at FY22, which was 11.6, FY21, which was 11.1. Those are probably more realistic. But when you take into consideration some of the reductions we need to make because of adjustments to economic issues and changes in things like a hotel converting to a residential, the 9.8 is a good number, and it gives us enough of a cushion in case we don't take in the revenue as projected, or if we need to look at increasing revenue because of problems, for example, state aid cuts or changes to the economy. These next few sheets go into more detail of what each of the receipts are, and I'll briefly go through them. Motor vehicle excise tax is the tax imposed on owners of motor vehicles that are registered in the Commonwealth. It's governed by state statute, and the assessment is $25 per $1,000 value of the vehicle. The assumption for FY25 is based on 90% of the 5-year average for fiscal 19 through fiscal 2023. Those are actuals. There is an initiative brought forward by the governor to allow communities to increase the motor vehicle excise tax as a local option. It's legislation that the governor has filed, has not been approved yet, but that's something to watch down the road for additional revenue for the community. Hotel motel tax, this is a local option tax that has been in place since 1985. Towns were allowed to increase that tax from 4% to 6%. The town of Tewksbury adopted that additional tax in 2011, so we are assessing our hotel motels at 6%. We have 6 hotels in town. We will be losing one that's converting to a apartment building. So the projection for FY25 is 90% of the FY22 actual, and then from there, we reduced what we projected as one hotel's revenue for hotel motel tax. This is another area that the governor is proposing in the legislation to allow cities and towns to increase this tax, I believe, from 6 to 7%. The next is meals tax. This is another local option tax that cities and towns are allowed to adopt. We adopted it in May of 2011, which allowed us to assess 0.75% on meals for a local revenue. The projection for this revenue is based on 5-year average of FY19 through FY23. This is the final area that the governor is allowing cities and towns by local option to increase this by 0.5%, I believe. Other excise, this is a small amount. This is for a boat excise, similar to motor vehicle excise, that we will tax the value of a boat that anyone owns in town. I believe we have very few, as you can see from the revenue. Penalties and interest, this is a charge assessed on late payment of taxes and fees in accordance with Chapter 59, Section 57 of the state of Mass General Laws. The projection for FY25 is based on 90% collected in FY23. Payment in lieu of taxes, this is based on agreements with the Housing Authority for payment in lieu of taxes for property that they have in town. We just projected what we know to be in the agreements. You can see in past years it's been higher than others. They sometimes don't pay in a given fiscal year, and they have to catch up in future fiscal years. And they have a couple of properties that take time for them to finalize what they owe us in pilots, so it can go up or down in a given fiscal year. So what we end up doing is projecting what we know we're going to get in a given fiscal year. Charges for services, this is the ambulance charges. We're projecting this to be 90% of the FY23 actuals. Rates are 250% of 2019 Medicare allowable rates. The hope is to see in the future years this grow. We have in the budget this year funding in the department to run the ambulance 7 days a week, a second ambulance 7 days a week. So that's allowed us to have this revenue at a higher level than we've seen in the past. Fees, this is just charges by departments for services such as police administration fees for police details, sailor weights and measures, inspections from the fire department. This is projected to be 90% of FY23 actual. Rentals, this is an area that we had to reduce. Rentals is the revenues we receive from wireless carriers on us that have cell towers in town, on town property, or have cell towers on our water tanks. This had to be reduced because the carriers that are on the Astle Street tank, because of the work they did to move their antennas from the catwalk to the very top of the tank, was costly. Because they were the ones that had the burden of that cost. They'll not be paying any rent for 6 years. So we reduced this amount to reflect that. License and permits. This is license and permits for things such as liquor licenses, building, electric, plumbing, and gas permits, DPW permits, Board of Health. What we did is, in this projection, it's 90% of a 5-year average from FY19 to FY23, but we pulled out the building, wiring, and gas fees and did a 3-year average for more realistic review because we had some large permits due to Home Depot, and we don't want them to be part of the averages. So we backed those out. Fines and forfeitures, this is court fines, parking fines, and zoning fines. FY25 projection is based on 90% of FY23 actual. Interest earnings, this is what I talked about before. This is interest earnings on our cash in town. We had a good year in FY23. We'll have a good year in FY24 because of the borrowing of the for the DPW project. But as you can see in FY22, we had a negative because of the way interest rates were in the market. So it's a very volatile revenue that we want to be careful of. Miscellaneous state and other revenues we don't project. Medicaid reimbursement, this is revenue from the federal government for providing necessary Medicaid services to eligible Mass Health enrolled children. Again, because it's a federal government reimbursement, we're always careful in projecting this revenue. So the revenue that we're projecting for FY25 is based on a 3-year average of the lowest 3 years, which is FY19 through FY21. Reoccurring revenue, we don't project anything, and we haven't for the last few years, and we haven't even collected anything for the last few fiscal years. Non-recurring revenue, this is again money that we don't project any revenue for because it's not guaranteed. It's items such as FEMA and MEMA reimbursements and Medicaid reimbursements. So there's no projection in FY25 because we can't predict if we're going to get any. Finally, for a revenue source, other available funds. These are just other funds we would use to help supplement the budget or pay for the budget. In the past, we had teacher deferral to help fund the budget. That no longer exists, so We don't have any that will fund this budget. This chart will be populated once we go through the budget process and add in revenue from enterprise funds, as well as any town meeting actions. This chart gives you an idea of the percentage of revenue from each of the items we just talked about. As you can see, property revenue is the biggest revenue we have in town. It's close to 80% of the revenue that's generated. State aid's the second, which is 12.9, and then local receipts. This last slide is a summary of the appropriations and the funding of those appropriations. As you can see, we have a balanced budget. And when you look back at FY24, the reason why there's a surplus of $303,000, all of that is generated from water, sewer, stormwater, enterprise funds. It's not general fund. Any questions on that before I go into the actual budgets?
I have one question. Back to the hotel tax and the hotel that is moving out now residential. Was the hotel tax at a commercial rate or was it?
Commercial.
So now it's going to be swapping back to revenue, so that was factored into,
It'll be a residential revenue.
right, so is there a huge difference between,
Well, you're taxing at a much lower tax rate,
right?
so it could be. So, you know, it could be an even swap in revenue for the property tax base.
Okay,
The value might be higher. It's hard to say.
okay.
So it won't be, it will still be a loss in revenue to the community because of the hotel motel tax.
Well, my concern is that if it's was assessed at, say, $1 million and it's 13.39 versus
Yep.
26.
Yep.
I just want to make sure there's not a substantial difference.
Yeah, there could be, and I could talk to the assessor about that more, and that happens annually where you have a reduction in value or a negative new, what we call a negative new growth, because you've gone from a high value to a lower value, and that gets spread out amongst the rest of the levy.
Okay.
Anyone else before I go to the budget? So before we go to the budget, the important thing to note is the revenue, excess revenue that we had in projected for FY25 was $4,560,744. And that was generated from the increase of 2.5% to the tax levy. That was the new growth. That was a little over $100,000 in local receipts that are projected to increase, and a little over $1 million in one-time expenditures in the FY24 budget that were pulled out of the budget and will be split between the town and school to use in their budgets. The way we come up with our revenue share in the town, we take the new revenue of the $4.5 million, we reduce out a projected increase in the Shawshene Tech assessment. We're projecting 6%. I'm hoping it comes in less than 6%, and I'm hoping it doesn't come in more than that, which will reduce that new revenue by a little over $481,000. We would take out our Essex Aggie projected assessment of $30,539, and we have a net new revenue of $4,049,093. We take that revenue and we split it. 60% goes to the schools and 40% will go to the town. That's what we have historically done, with the exception of maybe 1 or 2 years where the town may have gotten a little bit more, but historically it's been 60-40. Then from those two amounts, we reduce the increased cost to health insurance, the increased cost for retirement, Medicare, and property and casualty insurance. And then you come down to what is left for the town and the school to use towards their operating budgets. And the school has $1,397,100, and the town $605,722. Now, the town actually will have an increase larger than that in its budget because there are a lot of one-time items that we did not need to fund again, so that'll be spread out throughout the budgets. But that's the new revenue for the community and how we split it up. This slide gives you a summary of the town budget, which, because of all the one-time expenses that were taken out of the FY24 budget, that were in the FY24 budget, it only shows an increase of $24,000. School budget went up $2,429,456. The exempt debt went down on the town side by $76,750, and the school exempt debt went down $190,500. And again, there's a Shawshene Tech increase and the Essex Aggie increase. And then the bottom line increase for the entire town and school budgets. These next few slides just give you a breakdown of each budget in the town and what they increased. I won't go through them in detail, but there aren't any major increases to note. I'll go over a high level of those increases in a minute, but we go through all the town budgets, starting with the moderator, going through to the public safety budgets, the library budget, DPW budgets, and then the unclassified budgets, which are more of our fixed costs within the budget, and includes the town school budget in the previous slide. There's a more detailed budget that we'll provide online, and that the selectmen and the finance committee are provided with each department separately, each line item broken down to its individual appropriations and justification for the increases. When you look at the pie charts on the town and the school side, as you can see, the school budget for FY24 is approximately 50% of the budget, a little over 49%, the town 36%. Shawshene makes up 5.93%. Our exempt debt, 4.74%. Essex Aggie's less than 1%, and the town's exempt debt, 3.62%. None of those percentages moved a great deal in FY25. This again gives you a breakdown of the town and school budgets and how they break out for salaries. As you can see, a large portion of the cost of our budgets is salary. 43% of the budget, both budgets are for salary. Operating is 18.52% in FY25. It's important to note when you look at health insurance and retirement, that makes up over 18% of the budget. Closer to 19%, and then exempt debt makes up close to 10% of the budget when you add both up. Strictly looking at the town budget. When you look at the town budget net of allocations, and when I mean net of allocations, I mean once you reduce the enterprise allocations that the town receives from the enterprise funds for the cost of items such as health insurance, retirement assessment, time that the town accountant's office, treasurer collector's office, my office spends on enterprise funds. When you net those costs out, the increase to the town budget is, it decreases $52,285. This slide gives you a summary of each of those budgets. As you can see, DPW shows the largest decrease, and we'll go through that in more detail in a minute. On the town budget, this just gives you an idea that the town budget is made up of 38% of it is salaries, 18% is operating, exempt debt is 8.9%, and retirement and health insurance make up 25% of the budget, 26% of the budget. Breaking up each department as a percentage of the budget, you can see our unclassified budget, which is retirement, health insurance, Medicare, property casualty, and make up most of the budget, 35%. And when you add exempt debt in, that's another 9%, so 43% of the budget. 44% of the budget is tied up in those areas. DPW Fire and police, all of the, obviously, the largest budgets, police being 16% and the other two being 13%. And that's where the funding for the town budget, mainly goes. So salaries increased $288,562 on the town side. That does not include a cost of living increase. As I mentioned earlier, those funds have been set aside. It only includes step increases and any other contractual obligations such as longevity. 2 positions that were vacant were not filled. One was a senior clerk position in the town treasurer collector's office and 1 part-time clerk in the police department. We did add 1 position. It was a systems administrator position in computer services. That was a priority position, and it came out of a report that was done when the National Guard did a cybersecurity assessment for the town. Their number 1 recommendation was to hire additional staff in computer services. We only have 1 person in computer services currently. Elections increased $28,700, and that's because we have a state primary and a national election next year. And that pays for the staffing that works in those elections. The operating budget for the town, net allocations increased $24,465. It decreased $1,004,579. The general government budget decreased a little over $2,600. Nothing major in the budget that changed. We saw a decrease in professional services due to the reduction in the computer services and a managed service provider. Because we're going to hire someone in the office, we were able to reduce that budget by $29,613,000, and the new person would be able to pick up those duties. The town audit went up $5,300, so that was one of the increases in the general government side. In the finance department, we saw an increase in our Munis software. Assessors saw a $7,199 increase for their appraisal services and their map updates. Community services, we saw a decrease of $9,450 in veterans benefits based on what we've spent. The Council on Aging, they saw a $7,131 increase in areas such as utilities and repairs and maintenance. Town facilities overall went up $2,883, and that's mainly because of the grass cutting contract we have for our fields and our grounds. Library budget went up $9,986 in areas such as utilities, their MVLC network membership, technology, and their book subscriptions. It's important to note that the library budget was funded appropriately to meet all of our certifications to receive 100% of the state aid that the library is entitled to. Continuing in operations, planning and development went up $3,410. Building department had an increase in its staff development for certification of the permit techs. Health department had an increase in medical supplies for vaccines. Police department had an increase of $52,136 in a variety of areas, but the main area that increase was $50,000 for a license plate reader cameras that were previously paid from federal forfeiture funds. Because those funds aren't guaranteed on an annual basis, we wanted to build that into the budget, which we did. And we increased to $20,000 to add cameras in town, which have been instrumental and important to the department in solving investigations. And that's under leases and contracts, that $50,000 increase. Then there's a variety of other items within the budget that changed. Fire just saw a decrease of $3,611 in their budget in a variety of areas. The DPW was the biggest area of all the budgets that saw a decrease, $1,219,790. The main 2 areas that were decreased, we took out $950,000 that went towards roadway maintenance. We had previously funded that budget in the amount of $500,000 over the last couple of fiscal years. This current fiscal year, we added another $450,000 at town meeting in the fall. But because of the budget constraints this year, we weren't able to continue that funding, and it was taken from the budget. Also, sidewalks, $350,000 was taken out. That was funded at town meeting in October. We knew that was going to be a one-time expenditure that would be taken out eventually, but that was part of that reduction in their budget. Both will be programmed into the five-year plan. We annually appropriate $250,000 for sidewalks in the five-year plan. $500,000, we appropriate money in the five-year plan for roadway maintenance, and if funding is available in the fall, we always try to adjust and put money back in the budget. The good thing this year that helped supplement the cut for roadway improvements, Chapter 90 increased this year. That gave us an increase this year that allowed us to make up for any cuts going into FY25. Finally, it's important to note that we do have the funding in the budget for FY24, which will be spent. It's the future funding that was reduced. Solid waste collections, there's an increase of $132,482. Our unclassifieds increased $945,921. Health insurance increased $279,000 on the town side. That's an 8% increase to our premiums, 5% increase to MedX, and 0% increase to dental. There was no increase to unemployment. Non-exempt debt went up $21,000, but starting next fiscal year, that will start to decline. Retirement increased $558,374. There was a 6% increase. We knew we were going to get another large increase this fiscal year in our retirement assessment, and hopefully that starts to level off to a less of an increase. And then the Medicare tax, which is based on payroll, was a little under $20,000. And our property and liability insurance went up $1,710. We budgeted for a 10% increase in our property and casualty, property and liability insurance. The reason for such a small increase is because we budgeted for a large increase in FY24 that did not that was less than what we budgeted for, so the 10% was based on actual premium. The Northern Middlesex Regional Communications Facility is going to increase $141,706, and that's the assessment for our Regional Communications Center. The reason for that large increase over the last couple of years, we kept the assessment on the lower end because we were receiving a grant reimbursement for the assessment. That's going to run out after FY25, so we wanted to put the budget at an appropriate level for the future. Capital outlays decreased $140,000 because we had a fair amount of one-time costs in our capital budgets in FY24 that were taken out, and there's a list shown there. There was an increase for new cruisers in the capital outlay budget for FY25, totaling $46,580, but that was obviously offset by all of the one-time costs that were taken out. The allocations that I mentioned earlier, which are a source of revenue for the general fund budget, increased to $141,699. Most of that was due to the Middlesex retirement assessment in health insurance and property and liability insurance for the water, sewer, and cable enterprise. The water allocations increased to a little over $123,000, sewer $16,785, and cable enterprise allocations increased $1,855. So like we always have in the budget, we have unfunded priorities that were left out of the budget because of the budget constraints we have. The first is operating funds for the DPW to maintain roads, sidewalks, trees, and drainage. Operating funds for facility and grounds to maintain the buildings and grounds. Overtime funds for police to properly cover shifts. Training for funding for the police department. Overtime for the fire department to cover shifts and to run the third ambulance. Again, we believe we have them funded at the proper levels, but, that's, We always have unforeseen circumstances that affect the overtime for our public safety. Additional training for the fire department, could always use additional funding. The Council on Aging would like to have its van drivers within the budget and not impact grants that they have. They'd also like to do the same with a part-time transportation coordinator, to fund that within the budget. One of the important items that we have looked to do each year, and this year is a real focus, is to look at our salaries to make sure we're competitive, to attract talented employees, and to keep our employees. This year, depending on how we end up with our cost of living increases and any contracts that are resolved, we really want to look at certain salaries of mostly our mid-level managers and department heads, to bring them up to what is a competitive salary to the area towns. Funding of an activities and program coordinator was something that we're hoping to fund this year. I know this has been a big topic of discussion. People seem to think we just flat out don't want to fund it. The problem is we don't have the funds this year to do it at this time. The hope is we can adjust as we move forward, if things within the budget allow. We will be opening requests for proposals in mid-February. Depending on how those look, we may be able to fund an activities and program coordinator, and we may be able to even fund one part-time if we wanted to, but we just need to see how things evolve. Again, I want to stress, this is not because we don't want to fund one or we lost interest in it. It's because simply the finances this year don't allow it. Additional staffing and operating funds for the schools are always needed. Funding for town and school capital projects to purchase vehicles, equipment, and maintain facilities and undertake projects, again, are always unfunded priorities that get pushed to the side during the budget process. All of these will be looked at as the budget unfolds, depending on how costs are finalized. And there are always items that we revisit in October. Once we know what our state aid is, once we finally know what our new growth is, how our revenues come in, we always adjust in the fall to address unfunded priorities. The budget process doesn't start and end in May. It really goes through October of next year and beyond. Any questions on the town budget? I know that was a lot.
Question? Thank you, Chairman. Going back to the budget summary for solid waste, what's the current contract status? When does that run out?
Sorry. We actually are in a new contract with Republic Services. And we'll continue to, that started last fiscal year.
Yep.
No, it started this fiscal year, it was the first year. It's a 5-year contract. We have not decided on where we're going to send our solid waste.
That was my next question.
we
What
current-
about Covanta?
Great question. We send it to Covanta currently, but we have a proposal from Republic to use their facility. Their cost is a little bit higher, but Covanta, we have service problems with, and it impacts service in town. So we haven't decided if we're going to stay with Covanta, which would be about close to $98 a ton, or go with Republic, which is $103 a ton.
It's really kind of a de minimis difference
Right.
per tonnage, but Covanta, because they have so many backups at their facilities, and then the trucks end up sitting in line waiting to, it costs us more money, and they don't finish their runs.
Correct.
sometimes. They have to
Correct.
back it, So that's why tracks sometimes get picked up.
Correct. So part of our agreement in the new agreement was if we, and the reason why we believe we got a good deal in our contract with Republic was because they reduced their new contract price because there's a hope that we would go to their facility. If we don't go to their facility, then the next year would bump up a little over 1%. We costed out the difference between going to Covanta and going to Republic's location at Devon's. It breaks even. It's within a couple of $1,000s of each other. But as Selectman Wellman said, Select Board member said, the wait times at Covanta could be 3 hours. And if they're in the trucks for 3 hours, that means they're not getting back to town to finish their routes. If they're in the wait lines at Covanta for a certain period of time, they could start charging us for that time. So from a service standpoint, from a financial standpoint, we're leaning towards going with Republic at Devon's. We're in a regional agreement with Burlington, who's of the same failing. We just need to finalize that decision and finalize the contract. But that's where we're leaning towards at the moment. Right now, because of the lines that are at Covanta, we know enough, we know ahead of time, we've been diverting our trash to Devon's. But, you know, that's not, we don't always know that to be the case until we get there. So that's how we stand.
I know that we're gonna meet tomorrow, I don't have more questions.
Sure.
We're just looking at it today. I looked at these budgets for about 15 years, one way or another, sitting either at this table or there. So, you know, once again, you always done a great job with the presentation. One area that I do want to look at in the future is our revenues for field revenues. And I asked you for that information, we'll talk more about that as it goes, but I have questions about that.
Yeah,
How we can amend those, yeah.
Yeah, we take in somewhere around $30,000 a year in field, mostly from the youth groups, and they're $15 per person that is in there, per athlete that's in the program. And that was put in place prior to me getting here, and the intent of that fee was to go back into the facilities. So we use it for, we've used it in the past to rebuild baseball diamonds. We've used it to cut back trees, things like that. So that's really the revenue we generate for the rec revolving account. There have been some years we haven't spent any, so it's built up. We don't rent out the fields for private use because they use so much just for our youth groups.
Oh, yeah.
So, but we can go over that in more detail.
And then are we going to talk tonight or later as we go on with the balances in our enterprise funds and everything?
So I would like to do the enterprise funds on a separate night because there's so much to them. And hopefully in the next 2 to 3 weeks, if the board can set a date, we can do that. They're done and they're ready to go. It's just a matter of, I just know this is a long enough presentation that people are ready to nod off. Enterprise fund should be another night.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Manager.
All right, the school budget. So the school budget without exempt debt is going to increase $2,429,456. Salaries are going to increase $1,107,168 for longevity, step increases, and other contractual obligations. That doesn't include anything regarding a cost of living increase or union contract settlements. Their operating budget is projected to increase $289,932. This is for general building and office supplies, building maintenance and service contracts for technology and utilities. It includes a 6.5% increase for transportation. That's also being offset by a reduction in one bus within the fleet. And there's a projected 4.69% increase for out-of-district tuitions. There's no increase in their capital outlay, and their fixed costs are going to increase to $1,032,356. Similar to the town side, health insurance is going to increase 8%, and their MedX 5%. But because of their subscriber increase and subscribers that they have, it's going to be $786,007. And I just want to point out one important note on health insurance. We don't just budget for the number of subscribers we have to project for subscribers in the future. And one of the areas we work hard to project and has an added cost to us, we have a fair amount of individuals who are on our health insurance plans that are under 26 years old. They're on their parents' plans. They'll be coming off their parents' plans and coming onto our plans. So we need to look at that data and know who we should project. And that impacts us, and that impacted both the town and school this year. Their retirement assessment, because they have less people in their Middlesex retirement, went up $123,621. Their property and liability insurance increased 10% of the actual premium for FY24 in the amount of $51,008. Medicare tax, which is based on payroll, went up $71,720, and there was no increase in their unemployment. As I mentioned earlier, Shawshene Tech's projected to go up 6% at $481,112, and Essex Aggie is increasing 6% also, or projected to increase 6%, which is $30,539. This is a breakdown of the school budget within the general fund. As you can see, they're 52.9% of their budget is salary. Operating is 21%. Health insurance makes up 12.6%, and retirement makes up 2.6%. But as you can see from the slide, they're mostly salary in their budget. So any questions on the school budget? The business manager, Dave Libby, is going to make a presentation, I believe, next Wednesday to the school committee. More detailed on his budget, but that's a high level. So every year I try to go back over the budget and do a 5-year projection. These are based on a variety of assumptions that always change. When I look at the next 5 years, from 26 to 30, as you can see, going into FY26, the town will have a deficit in each of the next 5 years, but that can change easily if we see state aid increase, because I've kept that level. If we see new growth come in higher in any given year, it will change those numbers because I have that not increasing. I only have revenue increasing essentially with the 2.5% increase to the levy limit, plus keeping new growth level at $1,050,000 a year. If our estimated receipts increase, our state and county charges decrease, it drastically changes how the outlook could be. What's important to know is, things aren't looking good on the state level. The economy is doing well, probably could do better, but everyone, I think, believes we're flush with cash. We are not. We need to still be smart in the way we approach our budget. We need to still continue to take the same approach as we've taken with our budget, because we could easily be in a situation where we're making cuts because we don't have enough revenue to maintain the high level of service that we have. So this just gives you a snapshot that the next 5 years are going to be difficult. They'll be manageable, but we need to continue to be very disciplined in the way we approach our budget. And that's in every aspect of the budget, whether it's salaries or our operating expenses. Some items to monitor. As I mentioned, top is our employee recruitment. We need to look at the competitiveness of some of our salaries so we don't lose people and so we can recruit good people. State aid and state and county charges, as I mentioned, we're not seeing a drastic change in FY25 based on the governor's budget, but that's something to monitor. I have a feeling that the state may push a lot of the increase in revenue to cities and towns because they're not going to have the funding to do it. So we'll have to look at those local options to see if it's something we need to do. Federal budget and federal requirements that change and affect our budgets and our costs. We need to monitor. And we need to monitor things like our Medicaid reimbursements, which are a revenue source for us. As we just talked about, solid waste and recycling costs, we're locked in with a service contract for the next 5 years, and we're going to finalize a contract on disposal. But that's a very volatile area that the town needs to keep an eye on in the future. Recycling, we're still disposing of our recycling items at $130 a ton. we're spending more to dispose of recycling than we are our solid waste. Impact of the state hospital on our public safety services. Both the fire chief and the police chief have done a good job advocating for funding for our public safety services that are provided to the state hospital. We have been fortunate to receive some funding in the state budget. Our delegation's done a good job in getting us funding on an annual basis, but it's not a guaranteed funding. We need to work on making sure we get guaranteed funding for that area. As we saw this year, the police received $50,000 in funding for public safety services at the state hospital. The fire was supposed to receive $50,000, but because of the state financial problems, it was cut in half. So we just need to continually work with the delegation to make sure there's secured funding. There is another funding source within the budget for communities that have state hospital facilities such as we do in town, but we're not sure if that has been cut or if that'll be provided to us. Shawshene Tech Assessment, we saw a large increase last year. I'm not sure what the increase will be this year. I know we have a fair amount of students that, and a fair amount of an increase in our number of students at Shawshene Tech. But I'm hoping the assessment is not what I've projected. But we need to continually look at, keep an eye on that, especially since there's been discussion about the need of a new school. So we need to watch that closely. Unfunded liabilities such as retirement and OPEB are always a concern. The retirement assessment had a large increase this last year and this year. Hopefully that doesn't continue at that pace, but we need to keep an eye on that. We currently fund our OPEB in the general fund at $650,000. We're well below what we should be funding it. The rating agencies that provide us a bond rating have indicated that's the only thing keeping us from a AAA rating. So that's an area we need to continue to look at. Stabilization fund, we use it on an annual basis. We'll use it again this May. We need to continue to currently put funds in that account. Currently, we have $18.2 million, which is 13.5% of the FY24 budget. The goal is to be somewhere between 5 and 10%. So we're doing well at this time, but we do plan to take money out of there in May, which will drop us probably closer to that 5 to 10% area. What's important to note, and I know people are focusing in on the stabilization fund, this fund has been set aside for emergencies and for capital equipment and projects and one-time costs. The town itself, over the next 5 years, has close to between $8 and $9 million worth of capital improvements and capital equipment that it needs to purchase. I haven't finalized the 5-year plan, but after a rough look, that's where we land. That doesn't even include the schools. So we don't even know what the school's needs are going to be over the next 5 years. I know there's a big project coming up to Heathbrook. I know there are other projects in the schools that are going to be priority. So although $18.2 million looks like a lot, it needs to fund our 5-year capital project so we can avoid borrowing money or debt exclusions or impacting other town budgets and other town services. And that $18 million can be spent very quickly over a 5 to 10 year period. And we also want to keep money in there in case we do have a year that we have a crisis or an issue and we need to go to it as a rainy day fund. On the next item, town and school capital improvements, whether it's vehicles, roads, sidewalks, drainage, buildings, and technology. Again, that's the reason why we need to continue to keep our stabilization fund at a high level. And we always try to strive to increase our bond rating from a AA+ to a AAA community. That gives us a good report card on our finances. This slide I like to put in every year. This is just a snapshot of the board's financial policies, how it's a policy that the board adopted a few years back, how we work to meet these goals within the policy. We'll probably look to update this to because it hasn't been updated in a few years, but this gives the town and the departments an understanding that the board has a policy. We've lived within that policy. We strive to meet that policy both as an administration. I know the board does as elected officials, and the finance committee does when they review the budgets. In the town, townspeople know that we're not just, doing what we want on an annual basis. We actually have a policy we try to live by. And that's it. I know that was, again, long, but covered a lot. One last thing before we go to any other questions. I would be remiss without mentioning that the department heads did a fantastic job this year with their budgets. They knew the guidelines going in when I presented the budget message in November. They met all the deadlines that were put in front of them. They met all the requirements that were outlined in the budget message. Their budgets are very detailed. They focus on the services they're provided and the costs of each of those services. So when the budget goes on the website between now and Monday, people will be able to see every budget and a breakdown of every line item. I actually think we provide more information on our budget than any community around. And it's a testament to them and the hard work that they do. And it's not just in developing their budgets, it's monitoring their budgets and ensuring that their budgets stay within the appropriation they get at each town meeting. Now, there are issues that come up out of their control that we adjust to, but the department heads have done a fantastic job, and they should be commended for the hard work and the good work that they have done. I couldn't do any of this without them. And I also want to mention that the school department has done a tremendous job with their budget. Dave Libby and I talk frequently. I talk to the superintendent also and the school committee members. Their budget that they put together, again, is detailed. We can understand where the money is going, how it's being spent. I have seen throughout the Commonwealth other school departments that have run into financial problems, the way they handled ESSER money and COVID money. We did not. Dave has done a terrific job, and the administration at the schools have done a terrific job, and that's a testament to them and to the school committee. So, Finance Committee starts Monday, and I know they'll delve into each of these budgets in great detail, and they'll do a great job before we finalize the budget for May. And that's it.
Okay, thank you. Let me just ask if any of my colleagues have further questions. Mr. Kratman, Mr. Mackey, do either of you have any questions or comments?
I have a number of questions, but I'm going to digest this presentation and go through it, and I'll sit down with the town manager, make some time to go through it as well, and we can bring it back when we discuss it further. So I'm good for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a few questions as well, if I'm also going to reserve mine. I do want to just summarize kind of my views after going through that and all the work that's been going on for the past few months. What it boiled down to for me was we have limited, essentially non-existent levy capacity. State aid is going to be a very large question. And we're looking at, in the 5-year projection, to start having deficits. Now, it's our financial policy, the board's financial policy, calling out long-term financial stability, and the great work that Mr. Montori and his team and the collective officials have done. I think we do need to try to find a way to do a little bit more if we can. Again, this is a very new budget. Even if you look at a lot of the unfunded priorities, there are a lot of things that should be very high priorities that we can't fund. But I do think we're going to have some very tough discussions as we finish this budget cycle. Thank you.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Holland, anything from you?
I'm the same as them. I just have to digest it all, and I do want to thank Mr. Montori and his staff for doing a tremendous job in this presentation.
Okay, thank you. Let me just offer just a couple of brief comments tonight. First of all, I want to reiterate what was stated by Mr. Montori in the beginning. This is the beginning of a process. We just received the detailed budgets as board members. So each of us historically will meet individually with the town manager, assistant town manager, and as questions evolve, perhaps engage with other managers within the respective departments with the town manager's facilitation. So the game is just starting, if you will. And we, like the rest of the community, get a preview this evening. And we have to, as has been stated by some of my colleagues, take the time to review and digest and then formulate whatever questions and concerns that we might have for those conversations. This is a process we all live through, starting in January for department managers, for the town manager and his finance team. It started way back before Thanksgiving. But for those of us on this side of the fence, it starts this evening, and it will progress up to town meeting. And as was stated earlier by Mr. Montori, it really doesn't stop because it will continue until we get to the fall town meeting. We have firm numbers that tie down the year end, and we can make final decisions and reallocations and all of the things that we typically do at the special town meeting in October. So this is a long process, but I think there's some clear message or messaging within the context of what we just witnessed and listened to. I want to note two things. One is over the last 5 or 6 years, I've had numerous peers from other communities reach out and compliment the town of Tewksbury for the depth of information and transparency of information within our budgets. And that's because all of the information that we just listened to and then the substantive detail behind each departmental budget, it will be put up on our website. There's nothing to hide. It is all there for any resident within Tewksbury, hopefully, and clearly from the comments I receive, people external to Tewksbury have taken the time to review it. That's a compliment to the process and the people who put the effort in to make that a reality. And it's something that I think we all, as residents, need to consider and keep in mind, that there are no secrets. This is not a process where you have to look and to turn stones over to find the gotcha moment. There's nothing to hide here. Review it, you're on your own. Formulate your own questions. Come to a finance committee meeting, listen to the detail that the finance committee gets into regarding specific departmental budgets. You can learn a lot, but I think at the end of the process, you probably will agree with the comment that this is a level service budget, it's a lean budget, we're using our resources as appropriately as we can. And that leads me to my second comment or observation, and that is, it's easy for any of us to go up to the mountaintop and look down and say, taxes are too high, or you're spending too much money, or I don't agree with the way that you did the allocation on local receipts. That's fine. But if you want to have a real conversation, you have to dig into the detail. All of the detail is here. There's nothing that you can't get access to. So if you don't agree with how excise tax is calculated, look at the document and come up with a better way to do it, and speak with the town manager or come to a public meeting and offer the suggestion. But all of the detail is there. The methodology behind the calculations are there. And that makes it very, very, very transparent. So I hope that people will step back as we go through this process. The numbers get more challenging, as you can see from the projections. We've lived through this cycle before, And the discipline that we have built and the policies that we have adopted have allowed us to thrive and be successful. And I want to remind people that we're in a situation on January 25 where we're being presented with a balanced budget. There are communities not too far from the border of our community that are struggling with the whole concept of needing overrides or dramatic cuts to services and personnel that, knock on wood, we have the luxury of avoiding because we've done all the hard work already. That is not something to take for granted. So I'm hopeful that people will not talk in the context of emotion and general statements, but speak to specifics, because that is the way that these budgets have to be decided. When we go to town meeting, we're talking about the detail. We're talking about the specifics. So I encourage people to dig in. The process started for most of us tonight. Everybody has a fair opportunity to do that homework, and there will be ample opportunities for people to come and offer their comments, questions, and observations, and we encourage that as a board. This is a community budget. It's something that has to get adopted at town meeting, and it requires input and collaboration to be successful. So I'll end with that. I want to thank the town manager. I want to thank his department managers and supervisors because, as he said, this is something that many, many hands are involved with to build up. Most importantly, the delivery of the services that were detailed is a 365 effort. And I want to thank them for what they do each and every day for the residents of our community. So I'll end there, and we'll continue the process.
One last document.
Want to talk about something? Yep.
Yeah, I just have a document that I'll leave for anybody that wants to take. I sent it to the board earlier, and I sent it to the finance committee. It's two documents. One is regarding free cash, and another is regarding reserve policies. And the reason why I brought these to, and people can take them, and I sent them out today, is because there's been talk within town about using free cash to fund operating expenses. There's been talk about using stabilization fund to fund operating expenses, using both to fund even salary increases. It's important to note that the documents that I'm giving you are from the Department of Local Services and the Department of Revenue, and their best practices for the use of reserves and use of free cash. And the one item that sticks out and you can see in the document says with free cash, and free cash is basically the surplus that we have at the end of the fiscal year due to our revenues exceeding projections and funds turned back from budgets. And it says as a non-recurring revenue source, free cash should be restricted to paying one-time expenditures, funding capital projects, or reserving or replenishing other reserves. The way I have seen, or what I've heard, and what people have been talking about lately is using it to fund operational expenses. That's not what free cash is for. That's not what we do in this community. That's not a good business practice, not a good financial practice. In regard to policies regarding reserves, such as the stabilization fund, it talks about reserves can be used to hold money for specific future purposes, to finance unforeseen or emergency needs, sustain operations during difficult economic times, or in limited instances to provide revenue sources to an annual budget. And it goes further, to restrict the use of the stabilization fund to non-recurring expenditures on an annual basis. And we have done that. That's the policy we have had. That's the practice we have had. So for anybody that's interested in using either or for operating expenses, it's just not something we have done and not something anyone should do, because the expenses they're talking about will reoccur year in and year out, and that's not, and these funds are not reoccurring revenues. The tax levy is, local receipts are, any other available funds that are seen as reoccurring, and our state is reoccurring. That's how we fund our budget. That's it.
All right,
So
thank
if
you.
anybody wants to see these, I'll leave them.
I like that. All right, we have one other item we need to attend to. It was put on the agenda through an addendum on the agenda in the last few days, and under new business. The Diversity and Equity Committee is, or has requested to use the town common for a Pride picnic on June 2nd. Ms. Wellman, can you elaborate on what that specific event is and purpose behind the request?
Yes, I can. The Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Advisory Committee last year put on an event called Pride Lights, and it was grant funded to light up the common gazebo. And we had an enormous, well-attended event by the community here on the common and at Town Hall, and the select board approved that use last year. This is a similar request. It's the second year. This will be earlier in the day because we had thunderstorms, like that happens on June in the evening. And we have some folks in this room who came out for that, and they were stalwart in the thunderstorm, like the police chief and many of us. So we would like to hold it in the afternoon. There will be some food trucks. There will be music on the common, and it's meant to be a family-friendly event observing Pride Month.
Very good.
That'll be held June 2nd.
Okay. Do we need specificity as to hours, or is that request in general for that one day?
General for one day.
Okay, all right. Okay, so are there any questions from colleagues on that item?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I have a question. Last year, we had the veterans and the Boy Scouts, which they usually do. They decorate the common on Memorial Day, and they put out memorials, the veterans, people that lost their lives during, during battles and memorialize their names. After a couple of days, they were taken down. I understand that June is Pride Month, but it didn't give them ample time to have their signs up. In the years past, they had at least a week to be able to put their things out, let them out, and let family members see the names of people that were done. And Memorial Day's on May 27th, and this is happening on the 2nd. So my concern is that they would be upset if they were taken down within a week, as they're doing this Pride parade, Pride picnic. Is there a way to have the picnic maybe the following week so that they could at least have their signs up? Or they go through quite a bit of time decorating the common. That's where most of the memorials are. And I just want to give them ample time to have their time on. They put in a lot of effort. I don't want to have their efforts being taken down in a couple of days.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee did not have anything to do with the Memorial Day decorations. We were not involved in any decision related to that. So I can't really speak to it. I have no problem leaving those decorations up and having that space respected during any event on the common. It would be anyway. So I see your point. The month of June fills up early. That's why I brought this request forward very early. This is a Sunday afternoon because so many different organizations and businesses participate in events all over the state. So it's hard to navigate dates, and there are competing dates for the rest of the month.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, any other comments? Questions? If not, I'll ask for any motions.
I make a motion to approve the use of the common on June 2nd, Sunday, for a community picnic in recognition of Pride Month.
Do we have a second on that motion?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion, and for our recording secretary, the motion's offered by Ms. Wellman, seconded by Mr. Holland. Because of virtual participation, we have to take a roll call vote. Mr. Kratman, how do you vote, sir?
Yeah, well, I'll vote yes, but I'm under the decorations from the veterans will be allowed to stay. Is that what
Yes, sir.
part of this motion?
Yeah, I'll take that as a friendly amendment. Yes, we will do everything we can to continue that Memorial Day observance for as long as it needs to be and protect that area if necessary.
Okay, thank you. Then I'll vote yes.
Thank you. Mr. Mackey?
Aye.
Mr. Holland?
Aye.
Ms. Wellman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye as well, so that's a 5-0 vote for the benefit of our recording secretary. June 2nd, Pride Picnic Day.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right, we have no other business this evening. We meet next on February 13 for a regular business meeting. I know the town manager mentioned possibly getting together to review the enterprise fund budgets and capital budget. Are you prepared to do that now, or do you need time to prepare?
No, I'll be ready, just want to pick a date. And if you want to do it, I just don't want to take up a board meeting on the 9th.
Okay.
Want to do that week or the following week, whatever.
13?
13th's fine.
You want to do Tuesday the 6th or the 13th?
Hold on, I just want to see. Yeah, as long as I don't have the teacher negotiations. Yeah, 13th should be good.
So that's a regular business meeting. You can front load that and do those on that night.
I thought your meeting was the week before.
We have a meeting on the 13th currently, Tuesday the 13th.
Okay. Yeah, I can do it.
You want to do that?
Yeah, as long as this could be a long meeting, as long as you.
Or do my colleagues want to have another meeting independently on February 6th, the week before, just for the enterprise funds?
I can do that too.
Do
You
it.
okay with that?
You can, if you're 13th's okay, I can do it then. Just do it on the board meeting night.
Okay,
Plan it.
all right.
All right,
Okay.
good.
Mr. Kratman, Mr. Mackey, you okay with that?
Works for me.
Okay. All right, we'll plan on the 13th. All right, I need a motion to adjourn at whatever it is, 7:41.
So moved.
So moved.
All right, I have a motion offered by Ms. Wellman, seconded by Mr. Kratman. Mr. Kratman, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Mackey? Ms. Wellman?
Aye.
Mr. Holland?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. We are now adjourned. Thank you and good evening.
Thank you, gentlemen.